This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
CBD is a game changer sweeping the nation. This hemp extract is the natural way to elevate your mood, eliminate aches and pains, reduce anxiety, and keep you sleeping all night long. It can even cut your workout recovery time in half. Get in the game today with 20% off all orders of CBD and lavender products from Lavender Lane, a lavender farm located right here in Milan, Michigan. Just go to lavenderlanemi.com today and enter coupon code DETROIT for 20% off your entire order. Guys, look, these amazing products are infused with calming lavender to maximize their effectiveness, meaning your CBD items only take minutes to take effect, which is way quicker than those pills you were about to swallow. On top of it, they are perfect for men and women. Lavender Lane has lab-tested CBD creams, tinctures, and roll-ons that are perfect for any situation, even if you're on the go. Put your health back in your hands by heading over to lavenderlanemi.com and entering coupon code DETROIT for 20% off your entire order of CBD and lavender products. What do you have to lose? Your satisfaction is guaranteed or your money back. So if you need lavender gifts for your loved ones or just looking for the natural way to ease your discomfort with CBD, go to lavenderlanemi.com and use coupon code DETROIT to unlock these miraculous benefits of CBD and lavender. That's lavenderlanemi.com. And remember, use coupon code DETROIT for 20% off your CBD and lavender products from Michigan's own Lavender Lane.
Why Michigan's season could be on the line this week against Iowa. Next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison. Brady gets terrific.
Throws it, get it, touchdown, Knight again.
Schultz just before Brazil got him.
And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Arbor back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris hacks a wall of him, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming, sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, and welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. I'm Steve Deace. My partners over at Wolverine Digest, Brandon Brown and Michael Spath, will be joining me here a little bit later on. But we begin with Michigan winning its first Big Ten game of the year, 52-0 over Rutgers. So a couple of things here, and I know this won't stop the Russian bot trolls pretending to be commenters in my comment section here on our YouTube channel. But everyone knows you can't take really seriously anything you did against Rutgers. I mean, just to put some historical significance on how bad they really have been and why Rutgers is the worst program in the Big Ten since the Denny Green, Francis Pay, Northwestern teams of the 80s. Since 2014, when Rutgers joined this league, this is a stat from Tom Fornelli at CBS Sports. Since 2014, when Rutgers joined this league, Big Ten teams have been shut out 19 times. 9 of those times, the team that was shut out was named Rutgers. All right. I mean, Eastern Michigan has as many wins the last 3 years against Big Ten teams as Rutgers does. So we're talking about a team of historical level of horrificness who is really a Sun Belt Conference USA level program attempting to compete in the Big Ten. So you have to take everything you do against Rutgers with a kilowatt of salt. On the other hand, though, I don't know too many people who cover Michigan, root for Michigan, who thought the Wolverines were covering a 28-point spread last week. And they not only covered it, they nearly doubled it. So you have to acknowledge Michigan still played better than pretty much everybody thought. What does any of this mean? Well, Saturday, we're going to find out. Because the University of Michigan is going to play a team that's pretty much the carbon copy of Wisconsin, a team that knows its identity, that thrives on rugged physical football, that isn't changing for you, that just dares you to beat them with better athletes. And if you do, God bless you. Good luck the rest of the way. But you're not going to get them to panic. You're not going to get them off schedule. They're stubbornly going to stick to their schedule regardless of down distance or what the situation or the scoreboard calls for, unless we're at a 2-minute drill at the end of a half or the end of a game. A team that will punch you in the mouth. And, everything sounds great for Michigan right now. You bring Josh Gaddis down to the field and you simplified some of the route concepts. And listen, all that stuff looked great on film. It sounds great right now. But as the great prophet Mike Tyson once said, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And Iowa will punch you in the mouth. And what we have seen with this team this year is we saw them get a staggering 8 count against Army until a heroic play by Aiden Hutchinson at the end of that game. And then we saw Wisconsin glass Joe them 2 weeks ago in Madison. Now, I do think Michigan is more prepared for a game like this than it was a couple of weeks ago. I do think it's found a little bit of the mojo we had hoped for offensively. It's getting healthier in some spots as well. I don't think it's the revenge spot for Iowa that it was for Wisconsin. If anything, I think Michigan has this game circled by having homecoming be this game and not Rutgers last week. I mean, after all, the Wolverines have lost 5 of their last 6 against Iowa, and sometimes in the most brutal of fashions, see 2016. And that's why I think the season is on the line this weekend. If Michigan loses a second conference game before we even get to those rugged Eastern Division games, and you were already struggling to keep a team disjointed and loaded with egos and things of that nature, reportedly anyway, you were already struggling to get this team some camaraderie, chemistry, some courage of conviction. If they were to lose a second game before we even get to divisional play, which, barring a miracle, would take all of the goals they had this preseason off the table, then good luck holding this team together the rest of the way. So I think the season is on the line this Saturday against the Iowa Hawkeyes. I'm going to find out in a few minutes if Michael Spath and Brandon Brown agree with me right here on Michigan Podcast. Steve Deace here, and I just wanted to take a time out to say thank you to the hundreds of you that are supporting us right now on our Patreon page, where you get a lot of exclusive content, my picks, both in terms of prop bets and also against the straight up point spread every single week, an instant reaction podcast that we put together for you after every single Michigan game as well. So a lot of you ask us all the time and have been asking us from the beginning. I love what you guys do. How can I support what you guys are doing here with Michigan Podcast? Go to patreon.com/Michigan Podcast, patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. And we'll thank you for rewarding us with exclusive content. And there's anywhere from $1 to a one-time gift of $25, whatever you're willing to do to support what we do here at Patreon Podcast or at Michigan Podcast via the Patreon page. We greatly appreciate you. Go Blue. Back here on Michigan Podcast, joined now by my partners over at Wolverine Digest, Brandon Brown, Michael Spath. Gentlemen, good to have you with us. And Brandon, let me begin with you. I want to give each of you guys a chance to address what I led off the show with this week and why I think the season is on the line on Saturday for Michigan. I think if you look at some of the stuff that you guys and others in Michigan media have reported after what happened against Wisconsin about some of the egos and some of the looking ahead with some of the players on this team, you already had some chemistry issues, trying to make this thing fit, work, some frustration implementing a new offense. If you suffer a second conference loss before you even begin that divisional gauntlet with Michigan State, Penn State, and Ohio State, not to mention a non-conference game with Notre Dame in there, I can't figure out how you would possibly stop this thing from fracturing at this point. especially when it looked like you had a bit of a confidence boost against Rutgers, and then you come out the next week, if you face plant again. So I think the season is on the line here Saturday for the Wolverines. But am I being hyperbolic? What do you think, Brandon?
I don't think so. I think it is. I think it is on the line. I mean, once if you drop that second game to a good Iowa team, I mean, they're not great by any stretch. I don't know how you get everybody back in the boat in terms of thinking that they can still go out there and win some of the tougher games on the schedule. And even at that point, if you do, it's probably too late. I mean, with 2 conference losses, I just don't see how any of the goals that the team has been talking about all week, we still have all of our goals in front of us. We still control our own destiny. We can still do this. We can still do that. If you drop a second game already to Iowa, you can't say those things anymore. So I do think this is the season. I think this is it. Can't go back and fix the Wisconsin game at this point. That was bad, and it looked bad, and it was bad. But you can't go back and fix that now. So you got to focus on what's in front of you. And right now it's Iowa, and they're a good team. They're going to come into Michigan ready to try to get a win, and they're not going to be scared. They're not going to be worried about what Michigan brings to the table. They've got the Wisconsin film, as does everybody. So it's going to be a really tough matchup for the Wolverines. And yeah, I do think that this is kind of the biggest game of the young season. I know we kind of said that. We said that about Wisconsin as well, and we saw how that went. But I think it's even up another notch now with 1 loss already in the books.
Michael, what are your thoughts on that? And you and I are a little bit older than Brandon, and we've got people that watch us that are much older than even us. We can remember eras where Michigan didn't win a Big Ten title, but still had a 10-game season, maybe won a major bowl game like 1999, Tom Brady's senior year. But we're in an era now where, we've got guys sitting out major bowl games. Michigan had team captains sitting out a major bowl game this past season. So I don't know that rallying the guys to, hey, we can go play in the Cotton Bowl. And, I don't know that plays for a lot of today's players like maybe it did in past eras. That's another reason why I think there's a lot at stake Saturday. But what do you think? I'm happy to be talked off the ledge.
Well, I don't know that anybody needs to be on the ledge going into this game. Right now, because certainly Michigan has a great opportunity in front of themselves to take advantage of and to kind of right the ship a little bit. But I don't think you're not gonna sell this fan base and you're not gonna sell this team on a New Year's Six bowl this year, unless it's the Rose Bowl, unless it's Michigan winning the Big Ten title and just being left out of the college football playoff, which could certainly happen after a bad loss to Wisconsin, but. If that were to happen, if they were to get to the New Year's Six, but it's like a 10-2 or 9-3 type season, I think you'd see 2 or 3 or 4 players sit out the game, and that can be a whole other story. I was kind of curious when you guys were talking about the 2 losses. So the Big Ten has been divisional since 2011, is when the start of the Big Ten championship game took place. In that time, which I mean, someone can do math better than me. I think we're talking either 8 or 9 years. I think it's 8 years that it's been played, and this will be the 9th year. There has been just two teams that have dropped 2 conference games and still played in the Big Ten championship, and that was Wisconsin both times in 2011, and then Wisconsin again in 2016. Every other year, there has been the team that has gone to the Big Ten championship game out of the East and West has either had 1 loss or fewer. The Big Ten East, which has been around since 2014, has never had a 2-loss team qualify for the Big Ten championship in Indianapolis. So if you're asking me how important this game is on Saturday, well, I would say this. If Michigan drops a second game, then the chances of them going to Indianapolis and playing for the Big Ten championship are nil. And if that's the case, I mean, motivation for the players, sure, but just this season is a failure if they don't play in Indianapolis. And I say that knowing that what we've already seen of Ohio State and how good they look and how impossible that game might be. But that's something to cross off when you get down the road. At the very moment, you want to have an opportunity. You don't want to be out of the Big Ten race the first weekend of October. And that's essentially what history tells you would happen if you were to lose to Iowa on Saturday.
So, Michael, let me go back to you then with the inverse of this. If you Yeah, I think we all agree, and I mentioned this at the top of the show as well. I pointed out some of the points of data that indicate how historically horrific Rutgers is, but I think none of us thought Michigan was going to cover that spread, let alone nearly double it. So we have to acknowledge, even in that isolated event, Michigan played better than many of us thought they were going to. But is it fool's gold or not? Well, I think the inverse of this might be true too. If you follow up a performance like that by beating a solid, traditional top 5 team, top 6 team in your conference, that, Michigan has one win over Iowa since 2006. So if you follow up an effort like that against Rutgers with a win like this against a team who's built very similarly to the one that just thumped you really good, what's that do for your confidence level now, right? Don't you start maybe believing that, yeah, that was kind of an outlier, or one-off. Coaches are right. We could, our goals are still in front of us. We did kind of reboot things a little bit. Is the inverse of this then true if Michigan goes out there and plays well on Saturday?
Absolutely, I think it's true. I mean, the game against Rutgers was much needed for just plain old confidence, just to get these guys feeling a little bit better about themselves. Beating Iowa would be good for the confidence of, okay, if we can beat them, we can challenge pretty much every other team on our schedule until you get to November 30th. And again, that's an entirely different monster that we're going to have to see how both teams are playing once they get to late November. But suddenly going on the road, still something that Michigan has to prove they can do. But playing Penn State becomes a winnable game. Playing Notre Dame at home becomes a winnable game. Playing Michigan State at home becomes a winnable game. The rest of the season, again, until we get to Ohio State, every single one becomes a winnable game for Michigan because they've shown that they can beat a team that is fundamentally sound. Hopefully what they show is that they've got the offense clicking a little bit more. And once this offense, coming into the year, let's revisit what the preseason expectations were. Coming into the year, we thought this was going to be the best offense of the Jim Harbaugh era by far. And we thought it was going to be one of the top 20 offenses in college football. If that team can get to that point this week, next week, by the time they play Penn State, who can't they beat? They can beat everybody. Again, and I keep on saying this just because of how we've seen them play, until maybe they get to Ohio State. And so that's what this game is all about, is taking another step forward, offensive confidence, and some defensive confidence too. So I 100% believe this can be a huge stepping stone for Michigan and put if a loss to Iowa essentially ends any Big Ten threat for the Wolverines, a win over Iowa puts them solidly back in the Big Ten race.
Brandon, you agree with that?
I do. I think, I had a pretty strong tweet when Michigan got beat badly by Wisconsin, where I thought that the ceiling for the team was now 8-4. And, I still don't think they're as good as Notre Dame. I definitely don't think they're as good as Ohio State. And kind of going, piggybacking off what Michael said, if Michigan can beat Iowa, and it's, I don't have to, have to say it's a dominant win, but they beat Iowa in a fashion that makes you, have some confidence in what they're doing on both sides of the ball again, then I think you can look at Penn State on the road as winnable. I certainly think Michigan State in the big house is winnable at that point. So, it's one of those things where you just have to wait and see a little bit because, yes, Rutgers is very, very bad. But like you said, Steve, nobody thought they would cover that spread, let alone double it almost. So this is why, and we talked about this on the radio today, this is why things change week in and week out, and there's ebbs and flows, and it's a roller coaster. And if Justin Fields gets hurt this weekend or something, suddenly we have a completely different discussion about what Ohio State can be. There's just so many things that can happen. But as of this weekend, if they can beat Iowa and it looks pretty solid, then you start to change the narrative a little bit on what those other games might end up looking like. So first things first, take care of Iowa, and then you can start to look at, what the chances are or how it plays out for the rest of the year and what Michigan might ultimately be able to achieve.
Brandon, back to you with a question specific for you because of what you do for us here at Wolverine Digest. You're up there every week. You're at all the press avails. Can you give our audience an idea? You can listen to clips. You can watch even the videos that you put up on our site or, the transcripts and analysis that other sites that do a great job as well write about. But you get a chance to look these guys in the eye, both the coaches and the players, and watch them in their own element. What can you tell us about the body language that you have witnessed and just some of the attitudinal stuff over these last few weeks? Has there been any up and down, any evolution there, anything that's kind of stood out to you at all?
It was bad after Wisconsin, I can tell you that. I mean, it was guys kind of looked defeated. You know, there was some shame. I mean, I don't think that's too strong of a word at all. We heard, you know, Michigan legend Charles Woodson used the word embarrassed, and I think the current players felt that way too. They got absolutely manhandled in that game, and it was never close, and everybody was talking about it, and everybody felt it, including the players and coaches. So I think it was, you know, it was pretty bad after that game. I will say this: Josh Uche, on the other hand, was fired up. I mean, he was angry. He was upset with how they looked. He was upset with what the defense allowed Jonathan Taylor and the rest of the running backs to do in that game. And you know, you can go two directions after a game like that, and for the most part, it looked like Michigan went the right way. They came out against a bad Rutgers team and pounded them, did what they were supposed to do, and won by 52 points. So you do see a little bit of it. And I always say this about press conferences. I mean, like, you know, people want us to go in there and ask the hard-hitting questions and really put guys on the spot and hold their feet to the fire. But I mean, they're not going to throw their own teammates under the bus. Jim Harbaugh is not going to say, yeah, you know, if we lose this one, that's pretty much it for me. I mean, that's not what they do. So it's hard to really gauge, like, and I actually asked Devin Gardner this yesterday at the studio with Michael after he got done with his Monday morning quarterback. I said, you know, what is the true feel? Because we can go in there and ask, you know, what's your confidence level like? How do you feel after the Wisconsin game and now after the Rutgers game? And I asked Devin, you know, how do they truly feel right now? And he said, they're confident. They're built to be confident. They're not being taught things to do that are going to fail on the field. They go in thinking that what they're going to do is going to work. But he said the first couple of drives against Iowa are going to be paramount for how this team responds and what they feel like they're capable of. If things go well, you know, they put some points on the board, they get a stop, it's going to set the tone for the rest of the game. And conversely, if they fumble on the first possession again, or they're struggling to move the ball, or Iowa moves it right down the field, it could be hard to rally and get them back in a positive mindset for the rest of the game.
Michael, a specific question for you now. And, you know, Brandon joins you daily on the show, but you've been anchoring a show there in Ann Arbor for several years now. And, you know, you speak to clubs and fan groups all around that community there. For Michigan fans watching and listening to us around the country, what's the mood of the former Player Network, the fan base now, compared to where it was a week ago when we were probably at DEF CON 2?
The former players, I mean, after the Wisconsin game, it was discussed. You know, I talked to James Whitley on the show every week. He didn't mince words. I mean, this is a former captain. This is a guy who played. He was a true freshman, but he played significant minutes for the national championship team in 1997. You know, he said Charles Woodson was being too kind for the way that the Wolverines played, and that everybody was embarrassed. I would say this. I've seen a lot of vitriol from the fans after certain losses, Notre Dame a year ago, Ohio State a year ago. But that was the first time I saw openly former players and some really big-name former players, Jake Long, obviously Charles Woodson, Steve Hutchinson is a big-name guy who just came out and said, this is enough is enough. Like, this is not what we signed up for. You know, get the job done. This is embarrassing. And so there was a lot of anger that was bubbling to the surface, more so than I had ever seen in my career covering Michigan football. After this past week, generally the sentiment seems to be, okay, all these guys know what a game like Rutgers is about, whether it was Illinois in the past or Minnesota in the past or Indiana. Sometimes you need those games in the middle of the season to get back on the right track and to clear your mind. One of the things that the guys have told me is that players are far better than fans and far better than the media at brushing things off and moving on to the next play, or in this case, the next game. And if they believe, guys will start to believe again that, hey, we can win this. It's really not until that second loss of the season in conference play where things start to derail a little bit and the season can get away from you, like 2005 when they went 7-5, or 2013 where they went 7-6. Or just a couple of years ago when the Wolverines went 8-5 under Harbaugh. So, yeah, the guys are kind of like, okay, this is a big moment for them because, you know, they've gotten some confidence back. They've been able to hit the reset button, but the reset button only lasts as long as you keep on winning. And that's what they're looking for this game is let's put the Wisconsin game behind us. Let's still go out there and win a title. I mean, let's face it, other than the 97 team, how many Michigan teams in the last How many Michigan Big Ten championship teams, I should say, and I know it's been a really long time since Michigan won a Big Ten championship, but looking at 2003, they lost the game. 2004, they lost a game. let's see here. What's the one before
those seasons
that?
Just mentioned, they lost a couple of games. In 2003, they lost a Big Ten game and an Oregon game. And in 2004, they lost to Notre Dame in a Big Ten game. Yeah.
1992, they had 2 losses. You'd have to go back to 1991, 5 Big Ten title teams ago, besides the 97 team where Michigan went undefeated in conference play. In 1990, they won the Big Ten with 2 losses. In 1988, they had a couple. So Michigan's had a loss and won a Big Ten title numerous times before. And so that's still on the line, and that's what the former players talk about. But very rarely have they lost 2 games and still won a Big Ten title.
So when I look at this game on Saturday, and I think that with where Michigan is at with a couple of deficiencies and in scheme implementation, I think that narrows the talent gap advantage overall that they have with Iowa quite a bit, because their identity is so solidified. The culture is so deeply embedded there. I think there's one matchup in this game. In fact, I think it's the biggest overall mismatch. Iowa's offensive line is good, but it's actually the tackles that are the strength of that line. And one of them is coming back. He's been hurt this season in Alaric Jackson. And we saw with John Runyon, it's tough to just immediately plug a guy in there no matter how good he is. I think they're the biggest matchup advantage either team has is Iowa's secondary was not really the strength of the team coming into the year. They had some losses there already, and then they've had several injuries there, a lot of shuffling in and out of lineup there, up against the receiver group that Michigan can put together. My question there, though, is how confident are you two guys that Michigan can execute sufficiently to exploit that advantage? Brandon, I'll start with you.
That's a loaded question, because I agree with you. And in fact, I pointed to that exact mismatch on the show today on the radio about Michigan's talent level at wide receiver versus Iowa's, just kind of okay group in the secondary, and even maybe taken down a notch because of those injuries they've been dealing with. So I'm very confident in the potential. Now that's a completely different discussion. My confidence level for being able to exploit that. Even against Rutgers, it just seems like Michigan had some schematic and some talent advantages that weren't completely utilized. I mean, you saw a quick out throw to Nico Collins that turns into a 48-yard touchdown, but there weren't a lot of big splash plays for the rest of the game, and I just don't really understand why that is. So when you start to talk about an Iowa team that has much more talent than Rutgers and is coached better and has some NFL-type guys on it, especially along the D-line, with A.J. Epinesa going to be bringing some pressure off the edge. I still find myself being a little bit apprehensive on what Michigan's going to be able to do on offense. I just don't know if we're going to see that. I mean, sure, they scored 52 against Rutgers, and there was 4 rushing touchdowns from the quarterbacks alone and 5 total. But I just haven't seen the throw it around the yard thing that I thought we were going to be seeing from day one. And I know part of that is a new system and trying to get everything integrated, but until I see it, I don't know how anybody can be overly confident that it's just going to manifest itself against a good team.
Michael, do you think that Michigan is now capable of exploiting what I think is the biggest positional mismatch or matchup mismatch in the game? Your thoughts?
This is kind of a cop-out, but I'm really in wait-and-see mode. I don't know how anybody could say yes, but I don't know how anybody could say definitively no. I mean, we saw them do it against Rutgers. So 1 out of 4 games, they found the passing attack. They figured out that they had mismatches downfield. They figured out that they had mismatches in space, and they got those wide receivers the ball, and they used Shea Patterson in a way that fit his skill set perfectly. But that's 1 out of 4 games, and why did it take you 4 games to figure it out? What everybody else that follows this team, that is a fan of this team, knew coming into the season, and what they talked about coming into the season, speed and space and all that baloney. And yet they didn't utilize it. They didn't really cash in on it until the 4th game of the season. So how much confidence do I have that Michigan will go out there and do just that? Not a lot, because that's just been their history, is them wasting talent across the board. Now, the one hope is that Josh Gaddis, new offensive coordinator, he looks at it, and for whatever reason, it took him a little while to get into a comfort spot. It took the players to get comfortable with him, but he says, like, okay, I figured this out, guys. Like, I've got it. I know how we want to call a game. I know how I want to use Shea Patterson. I know how I want to use these wide receivers. And he just does it from here on out. And so that gives you kind of a little bit of a blank slate with a guy like that. So I guess I'm cautiously optimistic, but I really need to see them do it before I'm going to make any predictions in future weeks about that Michigan's got this offense figured out and they know how to attack a weakened defensive secondary.
Michael, are you surprised they didn't have Gaddis down on the field all along? I mean, I kind of thought after the game Saturday, it was kind of a eureka moment for me. On one hand, this is a program that's used to its OC being on the field because that's where Harbaugh has been for the last several years. But secondly, Gaddis was brought here to implement an offense that none of these other coaches had been a part of. He didn't bring a staff with him. It's just like the NFL. You bring a new OC in and he picks his quarterbacks coach or offensive line coach. So he's the outlier. A lot of those guys know how to read a defense if you put them in the press box and tell them you're the eye in the sky. What they don't know are the substitution patterns, the position groupings, things of that nature. And you're trying to get that all organized with a Chinese fire drill and a 40-second clock on the sidelines in real time. Now that we look back on it, and forget the fact of how they executed against Rutgers. But the detail and organizational difference was night and day from what we have seen the first three games, right? Is this maybe something they just should have done all along?
Well, it's easy for all of us to say that looking back, right? I think sometimes we can be overly critical and not recognize all the X factors and the variables that are going on. And so, looking back and then you go, okay, why wasn't he on the sideline against Middle Tennessee or against Army? But a lot of coordinators up in the box because they can see the full 22. They can see how things are unfolding. They have a better feel for where the open pockets are in a defense, and they can take advantage of it. And when you're on the field and you have a player's view, a lot of the things that are going on in defense you can't see because you can't see beyond their defensive linemen, or you can only see one half of the field because the other half is being blocked. And so, what good does that do if you're an offense coordinator and you don't know that the cornerback on the far side of the field is cheating, or that he's falling down a lot, or that your wide receiver is taking advantage of him? So there's an advantage for being up in the box. I would tell you the biggest thing that stood out to me on Saturday was just the emotion that Josh Gaddis had, the fire that he had. The Wolverines have talked for years about how they respond to Don Brown's intensity on the sideline and how that often fires them up in key moments in a game. Looking over and seeing their coach salivating at the mouth, foaming at the mouth like a rabid dog. And it's especially with Jim Harbaugh no longer doing that. And we've had many theories of why the Harbaugh rule that came into effect after the 2016 season, whether there's, health problems, whether there's just, I don't know, why ever he's mellowed out. But Michigan's been lacking that fire and intensity from an offensive coach for the last couple of seasons, and Josh Gaddis was able to bring that, and it made a demonstrative difference in the way that this team competed on Saturday. And I would look for that to really help them out and continue to be very beneficial for them going forward.
All right, final question for both of you. Brandon, I'll start with you. What is it you're the most worried about for Saturday, and what is it you're the most confident about on the other hand?
Oh, man. I think I'm just going to go back to what we just talked about. I'm still just worried about what this offense is really going to be about against a good team. I mean, we saw how hapless it looked at times against an Army team that I don't care what anybody says. I don't care how good people think Army is. I don't care how well they're coached or the weird scheme and all that. That has nothing to do with Michigan being able, or should have been able to just run all over the field against them on offense.
I'm glad you brought them up. I'm glad you brought that up, Brandon. Pardon me, because Army brought 10 of 11 starters back on offense, but their defense, they lost quite a bit in graduation. They lost their celebrated defensive coordinator who went to North Carolina. That's a total new rebuild on that side of the ball. You're right. We should have done much more, just pure athleticism against them on that side of the ball.
100%. I mean, I'll bow down all day to how difficult it is to stop that option attack on defense. I understand that, but when you've got guys like we talked about, Donovan Peoples-Jones, I mean, he didn't play. Nico Collins, Tariq Black, Ronnie Bell, even some of the young freshmen that are as quick as they can get and fast, long speed. All we heard about Giles Jackson and Mike Sainristil still all off season. Army doesn't have guys like that. They just don't, period. So the fact that they weren't able to exploit that is still really troublesome for me. And, we talked about what we thought was going to be an athletic advantage even against Wisconsin, and that couldn't have been further from the truth. So yeah, you go out there and you pound Rutgers 52-0, and I hope the Josh Gaddis being down on the field thing is a major game changer in what he's able to do and how smooth everything runs and what he's able to dissect. But until I see it, I'm worried about that. I'm just worried about what this team is going to do against an opponent with a pulse and with some athletes on the other side of the ball. On the flip side of that, what I'm going to be most confident about is, I think Don Brown is going to be able to get pressure on Nate Stanley. I hope. I mean, I still do think that Michigan is going to have an athletic edge at most positions on the field, at least based on recruiting rankings and where these guys are, projected to go after they're done playing their college football. You'd think that's the case, but actually that's probably the case with Wisconsin in many places too, and we saw how that one went. So I'm always excited for a Don Brown defense when they have better athletes. And we've talked about this topic ad nauseum. Whenever Don Brown is able to go up against teams that he's better than, it plays out that way on the field. And whenever the athletes on the other sideline are as good or better, it doesn't look so good. So I guess, man, that was a tough question. There's really not a lot I'm super confident about. That's probably a bad thing. But I really want to see this offense take off and explode and utilize what they have. And hopefully Don Brown continues to mix in some zone and then can put some pressure on the quarterback and make it a long day for the Iowa offense.
Same question to you, Michael. What are you the most worried and confident about come Saturday?
That's a tough one, Steve.
Yeah, I don't know how you're confident about anything. Maybe the special teams play. Will Hart and Jake Moody have been pretty consistent for the last year and a half.
By the way, for folks of you that do sports handicapping, if you're trying to figure out why the Michigan-Iowa line has been carved in half the first 48 hours it's been posted, that long William Shatner-esque pregnant pause from Michael Spath when I asked him what he's confident about, that is your answer. Go ahead, Michael. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you bought me a few seconds there, and I still don't have a real strong opinion on what I'm confident about. I mean, what can you be confident about? I mean, that doesn't mean that they're going to lose. That doesn't mean that they can't go out there.
We just don't know anything.
Win a big game, but yeah, I mean, what have they really proven? They've played one really good team on their schedule, and both sides of the ball look like absolute junk. They played a second pretty decent team on their schedule, and their offense looked like junk in that game, and their defense, as Brandon alluded to with Army, I mean, I'm not really going to fault them because that's a tough team to play against. But I mean, when have we seen they haven't shown neither side of the ball against a good opponent has shown up at all. So I don't know how you can be confident in that. I guess I'm confident that Josh Gaddis will yell a lot on the sidelines and Jim Harbaugh will stand there looking stoic but not show much emotion. And I'm confident that Jake Moody and Will Hart will do their jobs pretty well. And I'm confident that the student section will probably be 2/3 full at best for a 12 o'clock start against Iowa. Other than that, I don't really know what I can be confident in going into it. And in terms of just concern, I'm not, on the flip side, I'm not that concerned about anything. I want to see. I mean, this is another testament game for where Michigan is. And, they failed. They didn't get a D. They didn't get a C-. They got a big fat F across the board against Wisconsin. And what is their grade after this one against Iowa? This is a tough opponent, and we're going to know a lot more about this Michigan football team. If that Rutgers game meant anything, if it actually did give them confidence, if they actually did find a little bit of a groove, they should come out here and beat this Iowa team. And if it meant nothing other than it was the worst Power 5 team in college football that fires its coach right afterwards and shouldn't have given him a fourth year to begin with, then they're going to lose the game, and we'll go back to where we were after the Wisconsin game and kind of say, here we are, and Michigan football is kind of drowning in the shallow end. And so, yeah, I guess I'm not confident anything, but I'm not totally worried about anything too. I just really want to sit back as a I don't know, I'm not a journalist, a sports entertainer, or someone that covers the team, and just see what they've got. This is a big moment for Michigan, and I'm really curious to see if they're made of something or not.
Well said there, both of you. Hey, thanks for joining us again this week on Michigan Podcast. Brandon Brown, Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor, as well as WolverineDigest.com. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Anytime.
These are exciting times at Wolverine Digest. You can see right there, we are now affiliated with Sports Illustrated. We are the official Michigan channel for SI.com. So that, of course, when you're going to be linked up with one of the great brands in all of sports, when it comes to sports media and Sports Illustrated, and you're covering one of the great brands in all of sports, the Michigan Wolverines, you need to up the ante. Now, you can see right there on our title page, myself, Michael Spath, Brandon Brown, we are bringing you loads of content each and every day. I can't even keep up all day long with the content that we are producing on a regular basis. So if you want to get all of this content, it is right now free. Everything there, all the video, audio, the podcasts, the analysis, commentary, all of it is free for you at WolverineDigest.com. This week's Twitter poll, we asked you, do you think Michigan will beat Iowa on Saturday? 51% of you said no. 49% of you saying yes, so that's a pretty even split. I will say the early sharp money in this game, that's people that do this thing called sports handicapping for a living, all over the Hawkeyes in this game. I mean, the line is halved. It's opened at 7. It's down to 3.5 at the time that we're taping this here on Tuesday afternoon. And the public's not betting yet. So, that's not emotional public betting. That's people who do this professionally looked at that opening line and said, no way do we think Michigan is 7 points better than Iowa. And went in there and put the ultimate conviction on it, cash. And you see the sports books are right now backpedaling immensely on that line. So that'll be something to watch as the week commences. This week's question of the week comes from Stella, who says, how much should we be comparing the way Iowa and Michigan each played against common opponent Middle Tennessee? The common opponent thing, because they actually have two common opponents, Stella. They've both played Rutgers now already. They both shut out Rutgers. In fact, Iowa won that game 30-0. Michigan won 52-0. But if you look at the yards per play differential and a lot of the stats in the game, they kind of looked a little bit similar. I think Iowa clearly had the more impressive performance against Middle Tennessee, but it was also Michigan's opening game of the year in a brand new offense. So I think that had something to do with it as well. If you want to look at past history between the two teams, I would just look at what they've done when they've played on the field. I mean, Michigan has one win against Iowa since 2006. Now, what was that win? It was Devin Gardner's second start at quarterback in 2012 when Denard Robinson got hurt. His first start was on the road against Minnesota. He was outstanding. His second start, though, against Iowa, he was even better. And he earned Big Ten Player of the Week for those results. Now, if you look at what Devin Gardner did very well in that game, Michigan ran kind of a modified spread offense with a mobile quarterback and, a very effective and explosive passing attack. In other words, kind of emblematic of what Michigan was hoping this offense this season was going to be. The Hawkeyes have had injuries all year long in the secondary, and going into the year, that was not considered a position of strength for them to begin with. When you look at the caliber of athletes Michigan has recruited at wide receiver, that would seem to be the best opportunity for the Wolverines to separate themselves and win this football game on Saturday. So I think the past history between the two teams is more noteworthy than any particular statistical nuances against a team right now that seems kind of like maybe the 5th or 6th best team in Conference USA. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Hey, if you could do us a favor, if it's on YouTube, if you could subscribe right here to our channel, if you could leave us a like right here on our channel and share that information with other Michigan fans if you're listening to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, if you could leave us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice while you subscribe and share that information with all that you know. The more of you that do that, you're the best. You're the best we have. You're like our offensive lineman here. Clearing a way for us to get into the end zone. So the more of that word of mouth we get, the more that helps us to continue to grow what we're doing here each week at Michigan Podcast. You can also follow me on Twitter at Michigan Podcast and follow the work we do each week, every day at WolverineDigest.com. Special thanks to our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast for spreading the word about what we do here. Let's hope we're coming back and not wondering how low can the Michigan season go when we're doing this a week from now, because it is time now for the 2019 Wolverines to show us that they can be the team they all kept telling us they were going to be, right? If there was ever a time to do more and say less, this would be it. Go Blue.